I believe everyone has probably done a hybrid meeting. Maybe you knew that you were doing a hybrid meeting, maybe you didn't. I actually call them the intentional and the accidental hybrids. Because if I think back, I probably have done something virtual where I wasn't told that two people were sharing the same computer and sitting in front of the same screen. Therefore, that is basically a hybrid meeting, a version of a hybrid meeting. But there are a lot of challenges when it comes to hybrid meetings. So let's just go through a list of the things that I actually think make hybrid meetings really challenging. Number one, if participants can't see and hear each other, it's going to be challenging for them to feel like one group. And sometimes that means having a screen in person. Sometimes that means having extra cameras in person, having a microphone that everybody can speak into, and a speaker so the virtual participants can be heard by the people in person. Lots of tech that needs to be figured out here. And then when we do have people talking with each other, sometimes we get feedback because there's too many mics and too many speakers. So you can't just solve it easily that way. Sometimes it gets really complicated finding a way to share your notes. So if you're used to using flip charts in person, that might not be visible by people online. Another thing, talking about all of that tech, yes, there's digital whiteboards that can be used to solve that previous problem, but if the facilitator is not familiar with the tech, then that could become a big issue. Same thing if the in-person participants can't see the chat messages, right? There could be a whole conversation happening in the chat for the online participants that the in-person don't even know that it's happening. And that leads me to the last and biggest point. Online participants often feel invisible and forgotten. If most people are in person, it's the online participants that feel kind of excluded. And to me, that's the one reason people feeling excluded, people feeling like they're not part of the bigger group, that make hybrid so challenging, and maybe something that we should avoid altogether. Because when people feel forgotten, they will not engage. They will not walk away from this meeting as something that they enjoyed being part of. So what can we do to actually change this? Today, I am actually planning to share with you 3 steps that I go through when it comes to designing a hybrid experience that makes everyone feel seen and heard. And I would say that's maybe the most challenging part about hybrid. Why I haven't chatted about those tips very often is because I often think we don't actually need to meet in person and virtually at the same time. So this brings me to my first point, which is whenever you design an experience, start with the purpose of the meeting. Like, why are you bringing people together? And answering that question before you even think, oh, this is going to be virtual, this is going to be in person, or this is going to be hybrid, will already answer a lot of questions for you. So if you're doing a lecture or a PowerPoint presentation, my opinion, should be online. There is no need for team members, for people to travel somewhere, to be available in the same room, because you're just sharing information with them. It's one directional. So therefore, lecture, PowerPoint presentation should be virtual. If it's information that could be communicated in an email or a video message, then it doesn't even need to be at the same time. So that one's easy. What about creative brainstorming session? I would say that you could do this in person or virtual, depending on the type of activities that you want to do. Of course, there's some activities that can only be done in person, especially when it comes to moving around a space and all of the fun things that happen in between the sessions. Because when we try to brainstorm, when we try to be creative and come up with new ideas, sometimes the best ideas happen when we're not actively working on it, when we're having those chats over lunch or in the break. So I would say creative brainstorming session, probably in person. Team lunch to help people connect, or team building. I would say if you can do it in person, that's probably always better. Again, because the connections are going to be deeper if people can interact with each other and have a little bit more time. Company updates, like weekly updates, probably something we can do virtually. So I would say if you can figure out what is the purpose of why you're gathering people, that might already give you the answer of should this be virtual, should this be in person, or do we have to do hybrid? And I would say hybrid is one of those things when you want to gather people in person, but it's not actually possible because maybe someone who was supposed to be there in person, suddenly their flight got canceled, which is happening right now a lot, or they are sick, but they are essential to be part of that experience, of that meeting, then yes, we should make it accessible for them and make sure that they can join the conversations and the meeting. And again, the big challenge is how can we make sure that they still feel included and not just another screen that is in the corner that is just listening but not actively participating. The next thing that I want you to think about is design for the minority first. So we've established that if we do have to do hybrid, there will be people that are going to feel left out. So if we can think of who is that group that most likely will feel left out and design for them first, we're going to avoid a lot of issues, a lot of challenges further down the road. And for this, I actually want to look at this spectrum of hybrid meetings. As I said in the beginning, a lot of us might have already done an accidental hybrid because we didn't even know that it was a hybrid, because we thought we were doing something virtual and then two people are sharing a screen, or on the other end of the spectrum. So if we look at this graph right here, where we see online, mostly online on the left and mostly in person on the right, when most people talk to me about hybrid meetings, they imagine it's exactly split 50-50. Half of the people are in person, the other half are virtual. But to me, that's only one part, and actually one part that I've almost never encountered about hybrid. Often it's somewhere on the spectrum from one person in person, one participant in person, and everyone else online, or at the other end of the spectrum, one person zooming in and everybody else in person. And those, of course, are the much more challenging ones. So let's think about how can we make sure that we're designing for the minority in mind. If the minority is the in-person group, let's design for them first and then figure out how can we do the same activities or different activities for the people online, or vice versa. And then the last thing, and this is the part where I got really excited, because I want to have a look at this here. When you're designing a hybrid experience, you are actually not just designing one experience. You're going to start with either the in-person or the virtual experience, but basically you are designing two experiences. And this is also why I highly recommend that having a co-facilitator, so one of you can be in person and one could be on site, to make sure that there is a leader for each one of those experiences. And most organizations, I think, don't realize this and expect us, who are the trainers, the facilitators, the team leaders, to simply just add another participant on a Zoom link, or add another participant, like have two participants share a screen. But I think from the tech perspective, especially making sure that we hear and see each other, that gets really complicated. So as the third tip, I think we need to start thinking about, if we have these two experiences, the online and the in-person, how do we actually connect them? And this is the part where I started to think about, well, we should stop hosting hybrid meetings and instead create, for what is in the middle here, these hybrid moments. Because in the end, we're designing again, two experiences. One is in person, one is online. And then there's this overlap that is these hybrid moments in the middle. And because this might be a little bit hard to grasp, I want to share a little example of an experience that I helped design, that I actually led the virtual portion of it. And it might not be the usual meeting that you think of. It actually was a wedding, right? So maybe you were part of, or you've most definitely heard of a COVID wedding, right? During COVID, the wedding parties were really small. There weren't a lot of people who could attend in person. So one of the solutions was, let's just live stream the wedding. Let's set up a camera, connect it to the internet, and just stream it for people to watch. And that way they can be a part of it. Again, I'm thinking of, okay, the people who are tuning in online, they might have some questions. They might want to share some things with the couple. They're going to feel left out. They're going to feel forgotten, especially if they see all of the amazing things that are happening in person, like people getting cocktails as they come in, people sharing dinner. Like, why would you even live stream that? So most likely they're just going to be there for the ceremony and miss out on all of the rest. And even for the ceremony, they're not really going to feel included. So for this specific wedding of my friends Kara and Rob, who got married, actually I don't remember because it got postponed a couple of times, but at least a year ago, they had family traveling from Hungary and Brazil, and the wedding was actually in Canada. So they said, let's do something hybrid. Let's make sure that we create an experience for the people who can't be there physically that is also really exciting for them. And that way they were able to have a lot more of their family members be part of this experience. So here's what we did. We did do, like I said, a hybrid wedding. So there was a virtual component and there was an in-person component. And the in-person component is pretty much your average wedding with a cocktail reception. You have the ceremony, you have the first dance, you have the photos, you have your party at the end. And I was responsible for creating the online component. And this is kind of what it looked like. I actually took a bit of the schedule to share with you to show you exactly what I mean by creating those hybrid moments rather than a hybrid experience. So on the left, this is what happened in person. On the right, this is what we did online. In person, people had a cocktail reception that was actually going on for a couple of hours, basically up until the start of the ceremony. So while people were arriving at the venue, what we did online is, first of all, we had a little unofficial start activity. I had everyone guess some famous movie soundtracks. We did a little welcome just for the virtual participants, so they feel like, okay, they feel in the loop what's happening in person. And we actually did then have our first hybrid moment, which was introducing Forbes on the scene. So Forbes was a good friend of the groom and the bride, and he became our on-the-ground reporter. He had his phone with him, and I gave him the Zoom link, so he was able to join our Zoom call. And every once in a while through the wedding day, we checked in with him. So in this case, we just introduced him and who he is, and he showed us around the venue what's happening. And then while he was looking for the first person to interview, actually quick, I think I brought in some pictures, right? So there's Forbes and the brother of the groom. He actually went out and found different members of the wedding party to interview. And sometimes we would have questions from the online participants that could be asked. And then we had this very special moment that none of the in-person participants had, which was we were able to check in with the bride and groom before the ceremony. So we really wanted to make sure that, yes, the virtual participants are going to miss out on a lot of the things that are happening in person. But we also wanted to create these moments that are special that only the people virtually could experience. So this was one of them that none of the in-person people that, like, from the wedding that attended were even aware of. All right. And then we did some check-ins, we did some breakout room activities, really helping them connect with each other. Like I said, we checked in with the bride and groom. We continued with some more activities. We checked in with some guests. So Forbes was walking around finding people to interview. So we talked to the parents of the bride and groom, the siblings, other people from the wedding party, and we're able to connect all of them with the virtual group as well. And then we had one really fun part, which was a collaborative art piece. So this is where we invited people who are tuning in online and people who were there in person to co-create this art piece. This is actually what it looks like. We used an app called Pickles for this, and it had a simple prompt: draw what you imagine for the future of Rob and Kata's marriage. And these were some of the things that were created. And it was really simple because, number one, we had a link for all of the online participants, and we had a QR code that was visible on a large screen that was right behind where the ceremony is, what was happening. So as participants online and in person, we had to bridge a little bit of time before the ceremony starts. We were co-creating this art piece that then at the very end, we revealed to the couple and sent like the screenshot to. So what happened after that? Well, we had the actual ceremony, which I think everyone had a shared experience because in person and virtual, you're just there watching. So we made sure we had some good microphones on the couple, on the officiant, so we can hear everything. We had a couple of angles of the camera so we can make it a little bit more interesting, switch back and forth. And then they had an in-person toast, which of course they were addressing, the couple was addressing the group that gathered there in person. Virtually, we also had our toast ready, but we had a special virtual post after we did the newlywed game. And if you've ever been to a wedding, you might know the newlywed game where you ask, I think originally it's holding up a shoe, like bride and groom go back to back. You ask, okay, who's the better kisser? And they have to hold up one shoe for the bride or one shoe for the groom and see if their answer matched. So a really fun kind of party game. And we did a version of this where everybody who was there online could ask questions, and then the bride and groom would have to hold up their shoes. So we really tried to engage all of the participants virtually to be part of this. And then we did have our virtual toast. So there were actually two toasts kind of back to back. This time the couple was there right in front of the camera, in front of the screen, where they could see everyone who was tuning in online. Actually, I will share this in a second. I think I have a picture here. But after that, the in-person event continued with the wedding photos, the dinner, reception, etc. The virtual one we actually cut here. I think it was 2.5 hours in total because we felt that after the ceremony, after that game, after being able to share some wishes with the couple, almost personally, because they were sitting, here I'll show you the picture. They were just sitting in front of a screen at the venue. The virtual participants had a chance to engage with them. And I think that was a beautiful ending for that experience. And yeah, that is one example of an experience that has in-person, has virtual components, but also has these overlapping hybrid moments. So I want you to think about what is the meeting, what is the event that you're actually putting together next that you were asked to make a hybrid. Go through the 3 steps again. Like, what is the purpose? Does it actually need to be hybrid? Could it just be all virtual? Because I think if everybody's virtual, they will have a more similar experience, and probably it will be more impactful than having a few people here and a few people there. So last parting thought before I want to jump into some Q&A. I want you to stop designing the next hybrid meeting and start thinking of designing a hybrid moment. I'm really curious if there was anything that resonated with you from this video in the chat. If you have any other challenges that you have encountered when it comes to hybrid meetings, or you have some lessons or tips that you can share, put them in the chat, because I would love for the YouTube chat to become a really awesome resource with all kinds of tips and ideas. All right, there's one last thing, because I did say to a few of you in the beginning and in an email that I sent out that there's a very special announcement happening. So for this, let me pull up this slide. I do have a virtual facilitator training coming up, actually August 2nd to 4th. It's usually a 5-week cohort, but in this case, I've combined it into just 3 short days. You're still getting the same content, you're still getting access to all of the materials, but it's only 3 days. And there is a fast action bonus because the early bird deadline is actually in 2 days on July 21st. And anybody that enrolls by July 21st, as it says right here, you're getting access to a exclusive hybrid moments training. So I'm taking some of the things that I shared in this video and I'm turning it into a 2-hour training where we'll actually talk about all of the tech challenges and how to solve them, where we'll be able to go through your specific issues and come up with some solutions so your next hybrid experience or your in-person and online experience with hybrid moments becomes super impactful for everyone, for all of the participants. So if you go to this link, jankeck.com/VFT, you can find out more about that. And now I'm gonna check in and see who is still watching. I can see that there's a few people here. I would love if you have any questions to put them into the chat. I see there's one question from Barb, so let me just bring that up right here and see if we can answer that. Hold on. Let's format that a little bit so I can read it a bit better. So Barb is asking, designing for the minority first. You facilitate a session with 32 in person, 4 online. The design needed to focus more on the majority. I spent too much energy and time on the 4 online. Your thoughts? My first thought is, we had 4 online. Well, my first thought is, could those 4, could the experience be moved for those 4 people to attend in person? Or I also would think about what would it look like if everybody was online? Because that way we would just avoid all of the technical and additional things that we need to create. Again, you're creating 2 experiences rather than just 1. So my first question is always, how could you just do 1 experience if it's in person or if it is online? The second question I would ask myself is, yes, you do not want to forget about the majority, right? That's why I like to start with designing for the minority, but you're still designing for everyone, right? So the one thing that you don't want to happen is you design an experience for the majority. Let's say the majority is in person, and you come up with all of these fun activities where people move around a room and they write things on Post-its and they put it on the wall and they organize it, and maybe they do something else physical together. And then after you've designed that amazing experience, you're like, oh, and how do I apply that to virtual? And I think you're going to have a much harder time to then come up with ideas on how to recreate something for the virtual participants than if you started with them in the first place and then did it the other way around. That way you can at least make sure that you don't completely forget about them. All right. Okay, I can see is sharing some nice words about the virtual facilitator training. She's been one of the alumni and has used a lot of the things that she's learned. Awesome. And I see Yuri has a question. What were the main challenges with the wedding fiesta? With any wedding, if anybody has ever been part of planning a wedding, you know that there's usually very high stakes. There's usually at least one person who will get really upset if the smallest detail doesn't work out on that day. I was very lucky because the couple were friends of mine and they were very easygoing with the whole planning. Yet, with any wedding, timelines shift and change a lot. So I would say the biggest challenge was, can I make sure, as I was responsible for the virtual experience, to keep everyone engaged long enough if the ceremony gets delayed half an hour, maybe longer. I think in the end we worked almost on time, but I did have a lot of activities and thoughts of, okay, if I need to kill more time, what could I do? I think the other thing too which was a big challenge, I think for anything that you invite like families to, they were not really expecting to like wait and do all of these activities, at least not all of them. Like we send out lots of emails and saying like the virtual experience is like its own event, and you want to show up and meet some of the other family members and connect with each other, and we'll create some fun art piece. But there were still a few people who were simply there just for the ceremony. Like they weren't very interested in the whole interactive part. So I had to manage a couple of people with their screens off when I was sending them to breakout rooms, making sure that people at least have a partner. So one tip, especially when it comes to using Zoom for that, is I had participants click a button or change their name to make sure that they are okay in participating. So I'm not sending people to a breakout room that then don't show up. Awesome. Any other questions? Those are some great questions. And I'm just seeing we got, so Barb is in Calgary, also hot, 27 Celsius. Very good. All right, I'm gonna give you one more chance to check for a question while I pull up this slide one more time. For anyone that is interested in learning more about how I approach designing a hybrid experience, especially one that includes a in-person, a online experience, and these hybrid moments that I talked about in this video, you can check out my virtual facilitator training. And at the end, after that is wrapped up, I'll be hosting a 2-hour training where I'll actually talk about some of the tech challenges. Do I have a slide on that here? Actually, I don't. I was thinking of putting it on here and decided to take it out in the end because I felt that was going to be too much. We got one more question. Let's make this the last one. Whoops, let me bring that back. When is my wedding fiesta? Well, my wedding fiesta has already happened a couple years ago when we were still able to do it in person, and it was in person only. We did not have any online component to it. There are a bunch of videos and photos that can be shared afterwards, but that was before hybrid was really a thing that people were talking about. But thank you for the question. All right, I hope you all have a wonderful, cool rest of your day, and thanks for tuning in. Make sure to leave a comment in the chat if you have any tips or challenges about hybrid experiences. And let me press this one last button. If you liked this video, make sure you subscribe. I am doing another live stream on Thursday about a really cool Zoom update that I think everybody has missed. I haven't seen anybody talk about it yet. It's a huge deal. So hopefully you join me on Thursday, and if not, I will see you next time. Bye.